Hello, everyone. Welcome to another stream where I'm talking about each team after they get eliminated. Going to discuss the Miami Heat today. I'm Yossi Goslin, NBA salary cap analyst. You can follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, and YouTube, all at my name. See all of my salary cap videos, discussions I've been doing about all these upcoming offseason previews. You can also subscribe to Third Apron, where I have some deeper salary cap analysis. I'll probably get a little deeper on what the Heat can do later there. And you can see all my salary cap information on capsheets.com. And joining me today to discuss the Heat, who had like a one of the bigger roller coaster seasons, I think, compared to most teams, just in terms of both like winning and losing, probably like emotionally as well. And joining me to discuss, he is the host of the Five on the Floor podcast for 5 Reasons Sports. Ethan Skolnick, you can follow him on Twitter and Blue Sky, all at his name. Ethan, how are you feeling about the Heat in general? Has this season changed your confidence at all in them moving forward?
Well, losing by 92 points over 2 games on your home floor to finish your season tends to shake confidence. Yeah, a little bit. I think that we did an episode on Five on the Floor about how this was not the worst season of the Pat Riley era, but it might have been the season that made you question direction more than any other. Obviously, the Jimmy Butler turmoil, which was hit on a little bit at the exit interviews, derailed them to a certain degree. I'm not sure that this would have been a team that could have contended for anything significantly anyway. They needed a completely dedicated and healthy and available Jimmy Butler for the whole season, I think, just to get out of the play-in. Obviously, that did not happen. They did get development from Tyler Hero, but not really from many others on the roster. Jaime Jaquez took a big step back. Terry Rozier was a disaster. Those were supposed to be 2 of their top 5 or 6 players. And, Bam Adebayo had a real slow start to the season. So you look at it, you're like, okay, Tyler, what else was good? Well, Davion Mitchell, after they acquired him. Beyond that, there wasn't a whole lot of success this year. They did win the 2 play-in games on the road. I give them credit for that against 2 very mediocre teams. But, again, there were some fans who didn't even want that because that meant that they gave up their pick this year, which would have been 15th overall. Could have been actually better than that if they had not tried to play it out at the end of the year. But they do get Golden State's pick, which is 20th, so I guess they recapture that, just lose 5 slots. But it was a tough year, and I think the Jimmy Butler distraction and then trade has forced a direction for them, which I guess that's the one positive. But then we'll see how far they can go in that direction because they have an asset base that's a little better than they had before, but it's not a great asset base.
Right. I'm a little higher on their outlook than a lot of others might be on consensus. As far as like some of the questioning about them going forward, it's funny because I think back about that meme that's been circulating, because I'm not even sure if Pat Riley said it exactly like the meme that's going around where he said it's supposedly him saying maybe I am washed. Yeah. So, at some point as certain executives get older, you might start to question if their message is still being received as strongly, or if the plan is still, if it's still like, maybe if it's still like in times, if that makes sense, or if you need someone a little younger to like kind of modernize things. But I would say that, it's good that they still have, Spo, who can still just get all their guys to overperform. I still think he's the best coach in the league. And they still have, organizationally, they're still able to find guys out of nowhere to fill up the depth. I would say probably a lot of the frustration, I guess, not so much concern, is that, well, they're really good at drafting all over at any position. Why not take 1 year to like actually get a high draft pick and like maybe and get an actual star? Because and we'll get into like, how, now Bam and Hero is the first and second option. We'll get into if that's like, if that can actually be enough to be a true contender. But I kind of deep down, I kind of feel like, they probably should have just kept their pick. Like their chances are they're going to be a little better next year, and they didn't keep their pick at all. As far as Jimmy kind of forcing the situation, in a way, I kind of feel like that's kind of a good thing, where I kind of felt like it was inevitable, some sort of a reset, not necessarily like a full on rebuild, but he is an older vet. And it was going to come at some point. I think he's now with the Warriors, he's playing great, but he gets to be the number 2 option behind Steph. And it's possible even if he was fully bought in with the Heat, he might not be a good number 1 guy for the Heat right now, and like he was 2 years ago. So, yeah, I mean, I think like they still have like like organizationally, culturally to like make the push. I guess just so much do they have the high end talent right now. So like just from it just kind of feels like, right now, Bam being the number 1, Hero being the number 2, then being like you kind of interchange that depending on the role. I don't feel like that's quite enough for the higher end talent to like, no matter what else they can get from the rest of the roster. I do think they need to do a little better as far as their best player. I mean, I don't see too much turnover coming. I'm not sure if they're going to get a big name, but do you think they could do something, or are they going to be, as we discussed last year, running it back harder again?
We did say running it back harder. They ran it back, and it got even harder. They claim they didn't run it back because they did make some changes to the roster, but obviously not enough for the Heat's fans' perspective. I don't think that Tyler and Bam are 1 and 2. I think everybody on this team is probably 1 slot too far up. I think that's the case with Wiggins also. I think they have an interesting decision to make on Wiggins now, considering that he bombed out in the playoffs. So he had some good moments with the Heat. He never seemed completely comfortable. They seem to be trying to get him back to a Minnesota role more than a Golden State role. I don't know really what he's capable of at this stage. He has a contract that may be movable. I thought it was a neutral contract when they traded for it. He's got another year beyond that, beyond this upcoming year on it. So, now they've got Kyle Anderson on the books too, although he played pretty well in limited minutes. He's not a bad guy to have around. And then, they have Duncan Robinson with a partial guarantee. I think he's likely to be moved. Rozier is going to be very hard to be moved, even though he's entering to the last year of his contract. He didn't earn his additional incentives, so I think the contract's like 23, 24 coming up into this year. And then they have a decision to make about Davion Mitchell, who they will give a qualifying offer to. They do want to bring back if he gets a big offer somewhere else. I don't think that's going to happen, but if he does, we'll see if they match. They should bring him back if they can. And then Alec Burks, smaller free agent, a couple of others. But overall, I think it's pretty clear they need top-end talent. I mean, Tyler made a leap this year, but you can't rely on him as a number 1 in the playoff series. He doesn't get to the line enough. He's sort of easy to scheme out. I give him credit for what he did this year, but also counting on Bam to be a number 1 offensive option, that ship has sailed. He is what he is. I think he offers a lot. But he's also a max player, and as a max player, we know not all max players are equal. So they have a decision to make on Tyler too, on his contract extension, which he said that he doesn't necessarily need to get by this October, but then it'll cost them more than next year. I think they'll take their chances on that. I don't think they're going to give him. I don't think they're going to pay Bam and Tyler $100 million to lead the team to the 9 seed. So I think they have to do a real hard look at their entire financial book. They're doing that. They've been in on some stars before. They haven't gotten them. They were in on Durant at the trade deadline, but then Ishbia asked for basically every asset that they have. I don't know that Phoenix is going to be in position to do that this time, but now they have someone else running the show. So it is a lot of decisions to make, but I think the clear thing that's been decided is that they're just not good enough right now, and internal improvement enough is not going to be enough.
Yeah, I'm with you there. As far as heroes, that's definitely probably the biggest like silver lining for this season, where it seemed like a couple of years ago when the Heat were making their runs, they were better off without him, and now they finally figured out how to use him and have him play major minutes. So that's really important. But yeah, I do think they need to get like a better better top player. As I said earlier, it's probably not going to be the draft, because no matter what, the Heat have just never shown any interest in getting a high selection in the draft. They probably, they wouldn't have gotten a super high one if they missed the playoffs. I think it would have been like 11th or 12th. Still better than not having a pick, in my opinion. And they also think about 2017. They made a huge push to to try to make the playoffs. Ended up getting 14th, which worked out in the end. They got Bam. But it would be not I'd really love to know like what would happen if they had a top 5 pick. I feel like
they'll never do it. They'll never do it.
But imagine if they did, they would nail it.
Imagine if they'll never do it. They say they suck at tanking.
Yeah.
Well, they might nail it, but their attitude is we can find someone. We got Bam at 13 or 14. We got Tyler at 13. We'll find a really productive all-star level player no matter where we draft. I know that's not the conventional approach. I think they need to look at some of their approaches, but I can tell you, as long as Pat has any role in this, as long as Spo has any role in this, Spo has a bigger role than people realize. Nick Harrison makes the final decisions for the franchise. I don't think people realize that. They think it's Pat. And, Pat is 80, and we'll see how much longer he's going to have any influence at all. So, but for right now, as long as they are constructed the way they are constructed, it's very hard for me to ever see them even entertaining the idea.
I agree.
Kind of
and like the last time I believe they've only had a top 5 pick twice in the past 20 years. One was Dwayne Wade, one was Michael Beasley. So it could also have gone the wrong way. But anyways, as far as you mentioned the kind of rundown what the Heat have in their docket of what they got to do, we'll get to that. But I want to start kind of at the top because just they're always going to be star hunting. Now it's kind of like yearish 3 of that. 2 years ago was Dame. Last year, just very briefly, maybe could have been like Donovan Mitchell if he wasn't going to extend with the Cavs, but that ended pretty quickly. He ended up extending with them. Right. So as I look and see who can potentially be available, and we're starting to see some of the names, they have lots of expiring salaries, so they can easily make the money work. They're not like over the aprons or anything, so it's not going to be hard for them to make the money work. It's not like they got to get under the aprons or anything later. They've got a couple firsts to trade. And some young guys, mileage might vary on what their value is. Nothing super high other than Khalil Ware at the moment. But as I look and see who might be available, there's already some like guard speculation, maybe guys like Trey. But at this point, a lot of people might look at that because they went after Dame so hard. But now that they have Hero making what's like considerably less than some of these max guard guys, I feel like that's not really going to be explored at this point. Would you agree?
Well, they won't go after Trey. I know the organization doesn't like Trey. I'm just going to say the organization doesn't like Trey. When they beat Atlanta, I got a text from someone high up and says, this is why we prefer Davion Mitchell to a Trey Young. And it was a clip of Trey playing defense at the end of the game, or not playing defense. Yeah. So that's not going to happen. I mean, they're not going to go after a LaMelo. They're not going to go after a Trey. I mean, could they go after a Drew Holiday type? Yes, but Drew's probably too far down the road. That was probably a 3 years ago move. But they're going to go with a guy that leans defense. They need offensive creation. I think Trey would make Bam and Ware a whole lot better, but I don't think that's a direction that they would go.
Yeah.
Dame was a special circumstance. They even had reservations on Dame because of age, contract, and defense. The age thing has kind of played out because if you look at it, even though he's played a high level now, he had a serious injury, and is going to be out for a year. I'll tell you this flat out. They've told me they don't want to manage aging stars anymore. They're out of that game. Now, people are going to say KD. But KD is the exception because this has been a passion project for the Heat forever. When they thought they could have gotten him in 2016 and were very close, and Spo made a presentation that impressed him. But of course, he went to Golden State, which I think anybody would have done at that time if they had a choice between Golden State or go play with Hassan Whiteside and Goran Dragic, as much as we love Goran. So I just think that KD is the one exception. They'll have a price on it. They'll go a little bit over it. And if they can get him without giving up Bam or Tyler or Ware, ideally, then I think they would give that a shot. I know that their offer at the deadline was Jimmy's contract, Jovic, and a first. And again, the Suns came back and were like, we want Ware, Hero, Jovic, Jaquez, first-round picks and pick swaps. And the Heat were like, no. So if it's going to be that again, they're not going to get him. But the other thing is, I don't know if Katie's going to be convinced to stay there now. Who knows? So, but he's the one. I mean, the other thing is Giannis, Luka. Um, and that's the pie in the sky stuff. And with Giannis, it's just tough to see a scenario where Bam is not traded there. And I don't know if the Heat are prepared to do that. They have the same agent. And Luca just comes down to, what he thinks of the Lakers situation. And I think Goran's probably going to get into the Heat front office this offseason in some capacity. He's been around the Heat a lot. He told me a year ago he'd want to be in management down here at some point, and obviously he has a very close relationship with Luca. So I think there's like a Hail Mary there. But other than those two, I don't see the star unless the Heat's KD.
No, you basically read my whatever the names I had on there. I didn't have Luke on there. I'll just get by that quickly. Mm-hmm. I would guess he's going to sign his extension with the Lakers, probably a short one. So maybe that's something that he could revisit, like in a couple of years from now. So I'll just briefly touch on Giannis because, I'm sure maybe there's going to be some interest from Giannis to join the Heat. But as far as like what it would take to like make an acceptable offer the Bucks consider, I feel like Bam has to be involved. This was something I discussed yesterday. I had just a whole episode. We went by every single team about which, who can make a good Giannis offer. And yeah, I agree with you. I don't think the Heat are ready to do that. Even if it considerably lessens the rest of the package, you get to keep most of the young guys, most of the picks. So unless Bam's on the table, I feel like that's probably not realistic. But then KD, I feel like and I know all the reports that like the Heat were asking for like literally everything, that the Suns were asking for literally everything the Heat had to like a value, which didn't make sense for the Heat. I still feel like the Heat are probably one of the favorites for Kevin Durant, mainly because I kind of really struggled to find a lot of teams that make sense for him because so first they were involved with him at the trade deadline. Shams did mention the Heat like in the past month recently about like some of the teams that could be suitors. So they're still kind of in it. I believe he's close with Bam from Team USA. That's a thing, right?
He is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
he has a very good relationship with Bam. I don't think there's any question that there's an organizational fit with KD. He has a lot of respect for the Heat organization. He loves Bam. The question really two ways is, are the Heat in position to make it worth KD's while? Because there is this lingering thing over KD now that he hasn't won in a while. And this certainly wouldn't be a super team here, so he wouldn't get that knock on him. But, is this how he wants to finish his career with a Miami organization that is not really positioned the way they've been positioned in the past? He also has a very good relationship with Spo. So all of that plays into it. But again, are they ready enough to win for him? And also, do the Heat have enough on the roster that going to get KD even makes sense? I mean, if you're talking about you don't want to manage an aging star, you're not close to contention. It sort of feels like lipstick on a pig, honestly. Now, again, so that's why to me it comes down to what the price is. I mean, if Houston gets in the mix and they're offering something of great significance, the Heat can't match that. Okay. If OKC decided, okay, let's have a reunion here and bring KD back, the Heat can't match them. If teams like that don't get involved and really Phoenix just wants to reset, then sure, you have the Heat have tradable first. Maybe they like Ware, okay, and you put together a Bam Durant hero core, and you hope that it works better than a Durant Beal Booker core, and that you bring back Davion Mitchell, and so you have a defensive point guard presence, and then you hope that you get development from Jovic and Larson, and you have a pick this year, although you might have to move that. So I just think, I think it's really two ways. Like who does it make more or less sense for? And I think that's kind of where it's at.
So a couple of things. One, as far as the Heat, like any team that trades for Durant, I think has to actually think that by getting him, that's like the difference between like being a true championship contender. Whether you feel that way about adding Durant to Bam and Hero plus like a pretty competent roster, I would guess the Heat probably feel that way, that if they add Kevin Durant, that this could be the missing piece. As far as what it'll take and making sure you have enough left after, I might be on the, like, a lot of people might not agree with this, but I'm not really feeling it's going to be like there's going to be like huge hauls out there for Durant. Like they're not going to get close to what they originally gave up, the Suns.
Right.
And I'm sure the Heat are going to hold a pretty hard line. I would guess it's going to be like a pretty, like their offer. Like I wouldn't be surprised if all they're really offering is like Wiggins, one of their expiring. So like Duncan Robinson, who's partially guaranteed. Right. So, the Suns would get even more savings if they cut and stretch him after. And then just some of the young guys, I'm sure the Heat are going to, try to keep Ware, and then maybe just like a pick or something. So if you're keeping your main two guys with Bam and Hero, and you're still able to have like a pretty deep team, like they're already going into the offseason with 14 players under contract if you include their first round pick. So they can, do like an inbounds type thing and still have a pretty deep team. Like they'll still be pretty big. They'll just, I think for the most part, just need to work on the backcourt after, I guess. And like that wouldn't surprise me if that's enough to get Kevin Durant. I know that sounds crazy, but like at his age, his contract making a max salary, 54 million plus, he's probably going to want an extension. That's another element that like for any team interested in getting Kevin Durant, you probably got to be prepared to give him what Jimmy just got, like the max extension at like 50 million plus a year. So with that being baked in, that probably adds into the value proposition of this. So I think the Heat do have enough to get something done. They have like 3 firsts, I think, to offer. Mainly like the Suns get a lot of salary relief. You can expand the trade to give the Suns more salary relief. I just kind of struggle to see like some of these other teams being mentioned. Like I just don't think they make that much sense for Durant. And when you look, when you really look at who makes sense for Durant, I feel like the Heat really like out there make among the most sense. I'm not saying he's like they're like the perfect team for him, but they jump out to me as the one that just makes a lot more sense than most of these other, like, especially because they're younger teams. He doesn't really fit a lot of these teams' timelines like Houston or San Antonio.
Right. No, I can see that. But again, I think that it's the whole idea of managing the aging star. If you're talking about getting him from Wiggins, Duncan's contract, to first, and Jovic, I think the Heat are like, okay. But I think it may come down to, do they want to give up on Ware at this stage? I'm not really sure about the long-term fit with Bam and Ware anyway, but Heat fans are all, they wherever you can get a big next to Bam, you're like, okay, they finally got a big next to Bam. I don't. It's a little clunky, honestly, unless you have great shooting around it, and they don't have great shooting around it. Keeping Ware with Bam and Durant, I don't know if that works either. Then you got to play KD at the 3 defensively. That's not ideal. So as he ages, so I think the Heat would be willing to give up Ware for Durant. Again, he was the 15th pick in the draft. It's not like he was a top lottery pick. He has potential, but it's going to take a little bit of time. But I think that he would probably prefer to trade Jaquez, for instance. But he's, the problem is Jaime had such a bad season that really lowered his value, and that makes it harder. But I think if they can get him, again, cheaper, then yes, they'll make the move. And it also they've sold their tickets for next year, but it would energize a fan base that's very deflated right now. Yeah.
I would guess if Durant comes in, I want to say they should be a home court team at least next year. If you're at the point where you get to keep Bam and Hero, and Ware really is the big centerpiece at that point, like, is he, like, that's really the big, guy you got to decide on to part with that would hurt the most, then you're pretty close. So I think they'll be like definitely one of the finalists. I'm sure they're very interested in him. We already touched on like what else they could look for, mainly like I suppose this could link with Davion Mitchell, because as I look, there's not too much like there really isn't too much they could do other than do some trades. You mentioned that their top free agents is just Davion Mitchell and Burks. So it's a pretty simple situation. Maybe after they do a Duncan Robinson trade, or maybe they trade Terry Rozier, like maybe they could trade him with some seconds just to save some money, reduce their.
They don't have any seconds though. They don't have any seconds.
I think they'll have one. They're 2032. Yeah, they'll have their 2032. Yeah. So maybe if there's something they can do just to save some money, reduce their tax a little bit, because the only thing about their situation, I'm just looking at their salary cap sheet. They're about $5.5 million below the tax. You can see all this on capsheets.com on the Heat page. And I haven't really dug into what Davion's market will be, how much he can get. He can be a restricted free agent. He would have an $8 million qualifying offer. So, if they give that to him, then they're already risking going to the tax by a little bit. They could get below it later. Right. If he accepts it, that is. But do you have any thoughts on that, how that could play out for the Heat?
They're going to make the qualifying offer. They want to bring him back, and I think he wants to be back, but I think he's feeling himself a little bit because he did make such progress offensively. There is, though, a notion around the NBA that Erik Spoelstra tends to get more out of these type of players than anybody else. With the exception of Max Strus and I guess Derek Jones a couple teams later, it's hard to find any of these recent Heat projects that have been as good elsewhere as they were in Miami. Caleb Martin and Gabe Vincent, kind of the latest examples. There's lots of examples though. So I don't know that a team's going to go look at Davion Mitchell and say he's going to produce for us in our system the way he produced for Miami. And so I really think the offer is going to be muted. I think as long as the Heat don't insult him with the offer initially, he's not demanding to start. He was playing 35 minutes off the bench even when he wasn't starting. He does fit what they do. His shooting took a big leap. I don't think he's a long-term starting point guard. I do think he's a really good third guard, particularly for Miami. And so I think they'll make an offer probably a little bit closer to what they offered Gabe Vincent. Gabe was insulted by it, but then he had the chance to go to Southern California. But I think Davion would probably take it. So I think he's likely going to be back.
So a couple things there. I agree with you about the comps with him. Like, you think about all those Heat guys that they were able to get a lot out of. And ever since, around 2016, 2017, when they did that and paid those guys, it got really burned by guys like Hassan Whiteside, Dion Waiters, James Johnson. So they've really strayed from that since. Like, I guess really the only guys they've paid from that who've there's Caleb Martin, but they gave him a pretty cheap deal. And then Duncan Robinson, and that has not really worked out for them either. Right. So the big difference with Davion Mitchell is, though, that all these guys were second round picks, undrafted guys for the most part, like Strus, Vincent, Caleb Martin. Davion Mitchell's a former lottery pick, and it just took him a while to get to finally to show he can be a rotation player. Because it didn't work out in Sacramento, didn't work out in Toronto. Two teams that really value his player type. And finally breaks through in Miami. So to your point, there's not really much of a guarantee he could, there's not many other places you can say he'll thrive just as well as the Heat. So with that in mind, this also might sound a little crazy. I'm not 100% convinced they might even give him the qualifying offer. And to give an example of something that happened pretty recently with a similar type of player type, 2 years ago, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, the Wolves just acquired him. He had a very cheap qualifying offer. I think it was maybe $5-6 million. I was convinced they were going to give it to him. They did not, and they were able to sign him to even less than that. He's making $4 million a year. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying that that's exactly the same thing that's going to happen to Davion Mitchell, that the Heat could get him on an even bigger discount than $8 million, his qualifying offer. But when you just kind of look at some of the context that he worked out with the Heat, no chance. It's not for sure he's going to work out like this elsewhere. Mm-hmm. I do feel like the Heat have a little more leverage than we might think. I'm not saying that it's, they're going to really squeeze him or give him an insulting offer or anything like that. But I understand the emotions. He just had that crazy performance in that game against the Hawks. It seems like, it's easy to just get carried away with that. I feel like, when you just look at everything, all the whole context, people might be, I don't know, I guess disappointed with what his contract might actually come out to be with the Heat.
Could be. It could be. And again, if they're able to actually get him at a cheaper price, all the better. I think that, again, guys find fit. I think it's a good fit for him. I think he'd fit with any kind of roster they put together. That's the key thing. They're always going to lean into a defensive point guard. I think the lesson's been learned after Rozier. Lean into the guy that has that defensive skill and try to build the offense out of it. Now, do they need an offensive star? Yes, but if you're adding a Durant, Davion Mitchell fits there, as a defender. If you're going really young, Davion Mitchell is still a young player. It was a lottery pick. Makes sense. So I don't think there's really any scenario where they wouldn't want to keep him, and I think they will.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you're Davion Mitchell, like it finally worked out, I think you want to stick with the Heat. They have got something good going, and chances are this is where he'll be able to succeed the most. But Ethan, that's about everything I've got. I know you've got to run pretty soon. Like I said, I think it's pretty simple. Like they're not too much I could really expect from this the Heat team. They just try to do like somewhat of a consolidation trade, try to get a guy like Kevin Durant hopefully, and just bring back Mitchell. And then for the most part, the rest of the roster just run it back harder. I feel like that might just be it.
Run it back harder and don't get blown up by 55 in the last game. That's the new slogan.
Yeah.
Thanks, Yossi. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Ethan. Just before you go, you got anything coming up we should be on the lookout for?
Just follow Five on the Floor. Follow the Five Reasons Sports Twitter handle, Five on the Floor podcast. We're gonna still go 5 days a week or more during the off season. So catch us there. You can also subscribe to the Off the Floor Discord. You'll see us promoting that all the time on Five Reasons Sports. We cover all Miami sports, but again, on Five on the Floor, cover the Heat. We'll have you on soon, so I'll let you know.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, be on the lookout. I'll be on their show eventually. And you guys can follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, YouTube, all under my name, Yossi Goslin. Subscribe to Third Apron and check out capsheets.com. I will be updating it pretty often as we get closer to free agency. And I will probably be back this weekend to do another team. See you guys then.